Perhaps at this very moment, as you read these words, there's an invisible battle taking place in your home that you're not fully aware of. Maybe you felt it, that unexplained heaviness in certain rooms, those sudden waves of anxiety that seem to come from nowhere, the arguments that escalate beyond reason, or that persistent feeling that something isn't quite right in your sacred space. You might have dismissed these feelings, thinking you're imagining things, but what if I told you that your intuition is correct? The home you consider your refuge, the place where you seek peace after long days, where your family gathers and your faith is lived out daily, is indeed a battleground. Not a physical one with weapons you can see, but a spiritual one where forces of light and darkness contend for influence over your peace, your relationships, and your very soul. This isn't medieval superstition or outdated thinking. This is the reality that Scripture itself reveals to us, and that the Church has always taught with unwavering certainty. On September 29th, the Church celebrates the feast of Saints Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael, but it is Saint Michael the Archangel who stands as our great defender in this cosmic battle. The book of Revelation shows us this mighty warrior defeating the dragon, that ancient serpent who is the devil and Satan, hurling him down from heaven with divine authority. Have you ever wondered why this feast day feels different? Why there's something powerful stirring in your heart when you think of Saint Michael? It's because your soul recognizes what your mind might struggle to accept, that you need a protector, a warrior who fights on your behalf in realms beyond the physical. Today, you're going to discover not just who Saint Michael is, but how to invite his protection into the very walls of your home, transforming your dwelling from a place of potential spiritual vulnerability into a fortress of divine grace. Are you ready to learn the 6 sacred practices that will change everything about how you experience your home? You might think of your home simply as wood, brick, and mortar, a physical structure that shelters your body from the elements. But according to Catholic teaching, your home is far more than a building. It's a sacred space where the spiritual and physical worlds intersect in profound ways. Every corner where you've prayed, every room where your family has shared meals and conversation, every space where you've experienced joy, sorrow, conflict, or peace carries a spiritual imprint that affects everyone who dwells there. The Catechism of the Catholic Church teaches us that sacramentals, those sacred signs like holy water, blessed candles, and prayers, have the power to sanctify our daily lives and protect us from evil. This isn't magical thinking. It's the Church's understanding that God works through material things to bring spiritual grace into our world. When Jesus walked on earth, he used mud to heal the blind man's eyes, his touch to cure the sick, and his words to cast out demons. The same Jesus continues to work through blessed objects and sacred rituals to protect and sanctify our homes. Think about the spiritual atmosphere in your home right now. Can you sense it? Is there peace that seems to emanate from certain rooms, or are there areas that feel heavy, troubled, or unwelcoming? You're not imagining these differences. Just as our bodies can be healthy or sick, our homes can be spiritually healthy or infected with negative influences. The saints understood this deeply, which is why they were so careful about what they allowed into their living spaces and how they consecrated their homes to God. Saint Michael the Archangel stands ready to help you transform your home into what it was always meant to be: a domestic church, a place where God's presence is not just welcomed, but actively invited and protected. But this transformation requires more than good intentions. It requires specific actions, sacred practices that open the doors of your home to divine protection while closing them to spiritual darkness. Are you beginning to understand why September 29th is such a crucial day for your household? Now comes the moment you've been waiting for, the practical wisdom that will revolutionize your home's spiritual atmosphere. These 6 practices aren't just religious rituals. They're powerful spiritual weapons that Saint Michael himself uses to establish God's reign in your domestic space. Each practice builds upon the others, creating layers of protection and blessing that will be evident to everyone who enters your home. First practice: consecrating every room with holy water. Walk through your home with purpose and intention, carrying blessed holy water and making the sign of the cross over every doorway and window. As you do this, pray, Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, protect this home and all who dwell within it. This act recalls the blood of the Lamb on the doorposts in Exodus, marking your home as belonging to God and under His protection. Don't rush through this. Feel the weight of what you're doing as you claim each space for Christ. Second practice, praying the traditional prayer of Saint Michael. The prayer composed by Pope Leo III is one of the most powerful spiritual weapons against demonic attack. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. Pray this prayer before a crucifix or image of Saint Michael, allowing the words to resonate not just in your mind, but in your heart. This isn't mere recitation. It's a battle cry that summons heavenly assistance. Third practice, enthroning an image of Saint Michael in your home. Place a picture, statue, or holy card of Saint Michael in a prominent location where your family will see it daily. This isn't superstition. It's a visible reminder of the spiritual protection that surrounds your family and a declaration that your home belongs to God. Every time you pass this image, let it remind you that you are not fighting spiritual battles alone. Before we continue with the remaining 3 practices, take a moment to truly absorb what you're learning. If this message is touching your heart and you want to receive more spiritual guidance and protection for your family, subscribe to this channel so you won't miss any of these life-changing teachings. And if you're ready to commit to transforming your home into a fortress of faith, write in the comments, "Saint Michael, protect my home." Let this be your declaration of faith and your invitation for divine protection. Fourth practice, lighting a blessed candle. Light a blessed candle before your crucifix or image of Saint Michael, letting its flame symbolize the light of Christ that dispels all darkness. As the candle burns, offer specific intentions for your family. Pray for liberation from fears, protection from spiritual oppression, and the grace to grow in holiness. The flickering flame becomes a visible prayer rising to heaven, carrying your petitions to the throne of God through Saint Michael's intercession. Fifth practice, praying the Rosary as a family. Although October is traditionally the month of the Rosary, beginning this practice in late September during St. Michael's feast creates a powerful spiritual foundation for your home. St. Michael defends those who take up spiritual weapons, and the Rosary is the most powerful weapon in our spiritual arsenal. Saint Padre Pio, a great devotee of St. Michael, declared, "The Rosary is the weapon to win the battles of the world. Gather your family, even if it's just you and one other person, and let the prayers of the Rosary weave a protective mantle around your home." Sixth practice, offering a small sacrifice. Choose something meaningful, perhaps fasting from a favorite food, giving up social media for the day, or performing an act of charity for someone in need. Offer this sacrifice to God through St. Michael's hands, asking that it strengthen your spiritual life and open your heart to receive abundant graces. This practice of self-denial creates space in your soul for God's grace to enter and establishes your serious commitment to living a holy life in your home. These practices work together like instruments in a divine orchestra, each one contributing to a symphony of protection and blessing that will be felt by everyone who enters your home. You'll notice the difference. There will be more peace in your conversations, greater harmony in your relationships, and a sense of God's presence that visitors will comment upon without being able to explain why your home feels different from others. Your desire to protect and consecrate your home isn't a modern invention or a personal preference. It's rooted deeply in Scripture and affirmed by centuries of Catholic tradition. When God commanded the Israelites to mark their doorposts with the blood of the Lamb in Exodus 12:7, He was establishing a principle that echoes through all of salvation history. Our homes can and should be places marked by faith, protected by God's power, and set apart for His purposes. The book of Revelation, chapter 12, gives us the most vivid picture of Saint Michael's role as protector. Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. This cosmic battle isn't just ancient history, it continues today, and your home is one of the battlefields where this spiritual war is fought. Do you realize the significance of aligning your household with the victorious side? Joshua's declaration in chapter 24, verse 15, resonates across the centuries. "As for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." This wasn't just a personal decision, it was a household covenant that affected everyone under Joshua's roof. When you consecrate your home to St. Michael's protection, you're making the same declaration that your household belongs to God and will serve His purposes, regardless of what the world around you chooses to do. James 4:7 gives us the spiritual strategy that underlies all these practices. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. But resistance isn't passive. It requires active engagement through prayer, sacramentals, and conscious choices to invite God's presence into every aspect of your domestic life. These 6 practices of St. Michael's feast day are your way of actively resisting evil and declaring your home's allegiance to the kingdom of heaven. When you faithfully implement these 6 practices on St. Michael's feast day, you're not just performing religious duties, you're participating in a divine transformation that will yield spiritual fruits in your daily life. These aren't promised as immediate magical results, but as the natural consequences of opening your home completely to God's grace and protection through St. Michael's intercession. Liberation will be the first fruit you notice. Those persistent negative thoughts that seem to cling to certain rooms will dissipate. Family arguments that once escalated beyond reason will find easier resolution. The spiritual oppression that may have felt like a dark cloud over your household will lift, replaced by a lightness and freedom that everyone will feel, but perhaps not everyone will understand. This liberation doesn't mean you'll never face difficulties, but that you'll face them with divine assistance, rather than in your own strength alone. Protection becomes tangible when your home is properly consecrated to St. Michael. Visitors often comment that something feels different about homes where these practices are regularly observed. There's a peace, a sense of safety that goes beyond physical security. This protection extends beyond the spiritual realm into the practical aspects of your life. Relationships grow stronger, financial anxieties lessen, and health concerns find better resolution when your home operates under divine protection. Family unity deepens when household members join together in these sacred practices. Praying the rosary together, participating in the consecration of your home, and sharing in the spiritual life of your domestic church creates bonds that transcend ordinary family connections. Even family members who might be lukewarm in their faith often find themselves drawn into the spiritual atmosphere created by these practices. Their hearts softened by the grace that flows through a home dedicated to St. Michael's protection. Abundant graces flow into homes that are properly consecrated and regularly reconsecrated to God's service. Prayers offered in such homes carry special power because they rise from a space that has been claimed for the kingdom of heaven. Petitions made on St. Michael's feast day from within your protected domestic church reach God's throne with the powerful intercession of the Archangel himself, ensuring that they will be answered according to God's perfect will and timing. Throughout church history, the saints have understood and practiced the principle of consecrating their living spaces to God's protection. Saint Padre Pio, who had numerous encounters with demonic attacks, consistently taught the importance of holy water, blessed objects, and the invocation of Saint Michael in creating spiritually protected environments. He would often say, "The devil flees before the cross, prayer, and holy water." These weren't just pious sayings to Padre Pio, they were tested weapons in real spiritual warfare. Saint John Vianney, the cure of Ars, experienced so many demonic disturbances in his rectory that he nicknamed the devil the Grappin. Yet he never fled from these attacks. Instead, he responded by increasing his use of sacramentals, intensifying his prayers to Saint Michael, and maintaining blessed objects throughout his living space. The devil's attacks on the cure actually served to confirm the power of these spiritual practices, as the demonic fury intensified precisely when these sacred defenses were properly employed. Saint Teresa of Avila, doctor of the Church and reformer of the Carmelite order, wrote extensively about the importance of creating holy environments for prayer and spiritual growth. In her interior castle, she describes the soul as a castle with many rooms, but she also understood that our external environment affects our internal spiritual state. She insisted that her reformed convents maintain blessed objects, regular prayer schedules, and constant invocation of angelic protection, creating physical spaces that supported rather than hindered spiritual growth. Even saints who lived in earlier centuries, before the formal prayer to Saint Michael was composed by Pope Leo XIII, understood the principle of calling upon angelic protection for their homes. Saint Benedict's rule includes specific instructions for blessing the monastery and its rooms, while Saint Francis of Assisi's early followers were taught to consecrate their simple dwellings to God's service. The consistency of this practice across centuries and cultures testifies to its spiritual effectiveness. To understand why these 6 practices are so crucial, you need to understand how spiritual darkness operates against your home and family. The enemy doesn't typically announce his presence with dramatic manifestations. His most effective strategy is subtle infiltration that slowly erodes the spiritual atmosphere of your home until what should be your refuge becomes a source of stress, conflict, and spiritual dryness. Consider how this infiltration might already be occurring in your home. Perhaps it began with small compromises, entertainment choices that gradually became more worldly, conversations that slowly became more negative or critical, prayer habits that imperceptibly decreased over time. The enemy is patient and strategic, content to introduce small changes that accumulate over months and years until your home's spiritual climate has been completely transformed without your conscious awareness. Family relationships often bear the brunt of this spiritual attack. Arguments become more frequent and more bitter. Family members find themselves irritated with each other over trivial matters. Communication breaks down, and the natural love that should flow between family members gets blocked by walls of resentment, misunderstanding, and hurt feelings. What you might attribute to normal family stress or individual personality conflicts may actually be the result of spiritual influences that have gained a foothold in your domestic environment. The ultimate goal of these spiritual attacks is to destroy the family as the basic unit of society and the church. When homes become places of conflict rather than peace, when families scatter rather than gather, when prayer disappears from domestic life, then the foundation of both society and faith begins to crumble. This is why St. Michael's protection for your home isn't just a personal matter. It's a contribution to the broader spiritual battle for the soul of our civilization. When you properly implement these 6 practices on St. Michael's feast day, you're not just protecting your home, you're transforming it into something far greater than a place of residence. Your home becomes a fortress of faith, a beacon of light in a world that seems increasingly dark, a domestic church where the kingdom of heaven is not just proclaimed but actively lived out in the most ordinary activities of daily life. Imagine walking into your home and immediately sensing the presence of God. Picture your family members naturally drawn to prayer and conversation about spiritual matters because the very atmosphere of your home supports and encourages such discussions. Envision visitors commenting on the peace they feel in your home, asking what makes your family different, seeking the secret behind the joy and harmony that emanates from your domestic church. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it requires ongoing commitment to maintain. The enemy doesn't give up easily when he loses ground, and he will test your resolve to maintain these spiritual practices. There will be days when lighting the candle seems pointless, when praying the rosary feels burdensome, when sprinkling holy water appears superstitious. These moments of doubt and resistance are precisely when you need to persevere most faithfully, knowing that your feelings don't determine spiritual reality. The fruit of your perseverance will be a home that serves as a launching pad for missionary activity in the world. When your family experiences authentic peace, joy, and love in your domestic church, you naturally want to share these gifts with others. Your home becomes a place where friends and neighbors encounter something they rarely find elsewhere, a taste of the kingdom of heaven made manifest in ordinary family life. As we conclude this journey through the 6 sacred practices for St. Michael's feast day, remember that what you've learned isn't just information. It's a battle plan for spiritual victory that will serve your family for generations. The practices you implement today will create spiritual momentum that continues long after September 29th passes, establishing patterns of prayer and protection that become the foundation for all future spiritual growth in your household. The victory that St. Michael won in heaven becomes your victory on earth when you align your home with his protection and power. The dragon that was hurled down from heaven has no authority in a home that has been properly consecrated to God through St. Michael's intercession. This doesn't mean you'll never face trials or difficulties, but it means you'll face them from a position of spiritual strength rather than vulnerability. Your children and grandchildren will inherit more than your material possessions. They'll inherit a legacy of faith that has been lived out authentically in the environment where they learned what it means to be Catholic. The prayers you pray, the sacramentals you use, and the spiritual practices you establish become part of their spiritual DNA, equipping them to create their own fortress homes when they establish their own families. The 6 practices, holy water, St. Michael's prayer, sacred images, blessed candles, the rosary, and personal sacrifice, form a complete spiritual arsenal that transforms your home from a potential battleground into a victory celebration. Every time you engage in these practices, you're not just maintaining protection, you're proclaiming the triumph of good over evil, light over darkness, and the kingdom of heaven over the powers of this world. Today, September 29th, marks not just the feast of St. Michael, but the beginning of your home's transformation into the domestic